The Mystery of Silver Hollow by T.M. Connolly. Jack Holloway had visited Grandpa Walter's cabin before. His cousin, Lucy Holloway, had visited too. But this was the first winter they had both been there together. Jack was 11 and liked maps, old stories, and knowing where every road led. Lucy was 9 and believed the best adventures started where the road ended. Grandpa Walter's cabin sat high above the tiny town of Silver Hollow. Below it, snowy rooftops huddled together like they were keeping a secret. Far beyond the town, an old mine entrance rested at the base of the mountain. Jack noticed it first on the drive in. Lucy noticed that Grandpa Walter wouldn't look at it. That afternoon, Grandpa Walter filled their mugs with cocoa, while snow drifted softly past the windows. "Mountains are good at keeping secrets," he said. Jack and Lucy both looked up. "What kind of secrets?" Lucy asked. Grandpa Walter smiled, but his eyes stayed on the fire. "The kind you have to be patient enough to discover." The next morning, Jack and Lucy explored Silver Hollow together. The town was quiet, with empty storefronts, faded signs, and old mine carts half buried in the snow. In the general store, Jack found a yellowed newspaper clipping hanging crookedly near the counter. It read Silver Shadow Mine closed forever. It did not say why. Later, when they asked Grandpa Walter if there was an accident, he ran one hand through his white beard. "My grandfather told me never to call it an accident," he said quietly. That night, Lucy woke Jack and pointed out the frosted window. Far across the valley, beside the old mine, a single lantern glowed in the dark. The lantern flickered softly outside the mine. Jack rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, it was gone. The next morning, neither cousin could stop thinking about what they had seen. "Maybe someone lives up there," Jack said. Lucy wasn't so sure. After breakfast, Grandpa Walter handed them an old map of Silver Hollow. "Stay together," he said with a smile, "and remember, be patient." The map led them past abandoned homes, weathered barns, and rusty railroad tracks. Every part of the trail seemed to point toward Silver Shadow Mine. As they climbed the snowy path, Lucy suddenly stopped. Fresh footprints stretched across the snow. Each footprint led toward the mine. None of them came back. The mine entrance stood silent, outlined in a blanket of snow. Its heavy wooden beams were worn with age, and an old lantern hook hung empty on both sides of the entrance. Inside, the air felt colder. The cousins shined their flashlights down the tunnel. Somewhere deep underground, they heard tap, tap, The sound stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The silence felt even louder. Jack and Lucy looked at one another without saying a word. As they turned to leave, Lucy noticed something half buried beneath the snow. It was an old silver miner's helmet, stamped with the number 19. That evening, Grandpa Walter turned the weathered helmet over in his hands. After a long silence, he quietly said, "I haven't seen one of these since I was about your age." The next morning, Jack and Lucy returned to the mine. This time, they carried the old miner's helmet with them. The tunnel was as quiet as before, but then tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed once more from somewhere deep within the mine. The cousins followed the sound until it suddenly stopped. They found themselves at a fork in the tunnel. Lucy pointed her flashlight farther down the tunnel. For just a second, she thought she saw someone disappear around the corner. When they hurried forward, no one was there. They reached a wide chamber where old mine carts rested on rusted rails. Every cart was covered in dust. Every cart except one. The clean cart rocked gently back and forth. A cold breeze drifted through the chamber. The old miner's helmet slipped from Jack's hands and rolled slowly down the tunnel. It stopped beside a narrow passage they hadn't noticed before. Inside the passage, strange marks covered the stone wall. Some looked like pickaxe strikes. Others looked almost like arrows pointing deeper into the mountain. The cousins stared into the darkness down the hidden passage. Then, somewhere ahead, a warm lantern glowed to life. Not calling to them, waiting for them. The tunnel opened into a vast underground cavern, unlike anything they had imagined. Before them stood ghostly miners, quietly working beneath the glow of lanterns. None of them seemed to notice the children. A tall miner wearing an old foreman's helmet walked from one worker to another. He spoke without fear, and every miner nodded before returning to work. The cousins watched in silence. It wasn't a haunting. It was a memory. A deep crack echoed through the cavern. Water began pouring through the rock wall, but the miners didn't run in fear. Instead, they pushed heavy mine carts into place and stacked timbers across the entrance to the cavern. The foreman calmly directed every step. The miners weren't trying to escape. They were trying to stop the water. The roaring water grew louder. One by one, the miners stepped into the flooding passage. Then the memory slowly faded away. The cavern became quiet once more. Only one lantern still burned beside a weathered wooden desk. Resting on the desk was an old leather journal. Across its cover, faded gold letters read, "Foreman's Log." The final pages told of an underground lake, a weakening stone wall, and the impossible choice the miners had made. "We stay," the final entry read. "If this tunnel falls, the town above will live." Back at the cabin, Walter read the journal with trembling hands. "My grandfather told me never to call it an accident," he whispered. "Now, I finally know why." That night, the cousins looked towards Silver Shadow Mine one last time. The lantern shined brighter than ever before. Outside, the mine stood the foreman and his crew. One by one, they quietly removed their helmets. As Jack and Lucy went to leave the next morning, Silver Hollow looked different somehow. The mountain had finally shared its secret, and two cousins left with a story they would never forget. The end.